All right, good morning here from Minneapolis. It's time for the 49ers grades against the Vikings. 22-17, 49ers lose by 5. I understand that people were very emotional last night. I'm guessing some people might still be emotional today, but let's just open up with the fact that the 49ers are 5-2 and still at the top of the NFC West. Everything must be dealt with in context. We're not here to sit around and cry and be emotional when we analyze football. We're here to analyze how a very talented football team can fix some of its major issues so that it can seriously contend for a Super Bowl. That's what I'm here to talk about. I'm not here for any mistruths. There were so many mistruths yesterday in the comment section on Twitter. The main point is that the 49ers were going through very similar struggles at this point in each of the past two seasons. 2 years ago, October 24th, 2021, so we're on the 2-year anniversary today, the 49ers gave up 30 points in the rain to Carson Wentz and the Colts. October 23rd, 2022, so a year ago yesterday, a year ago from the game against the Vikings yesterday, the 49ers had their worst defensive performance of the Kyle Shanahan era against the Kansas City Chiefs. Both of those times, they figured things out. They turned things around. I had people in the comment section saying yesterday, oh, the 49ers were missing 7 defensive starters against the Chiefs. It's not a good comparison, which was a complete lie. They had all of their defensive starters last year against the Chiefs, and they still got embarrassed. They gave up 529 yards. But they turned it around. So let's keep that same energy of perspective, right? I get it. People probably didn't have perspective after the Colts game, after the Chiefs game. But I think that's why I'm here. We have to keep that perspective. In 2021, the 49ers dropped to 3-5. In 2022, they were 3-4. This year, they're 5-2. So that's perspective for you. They bought themselves a little bit of cushion with the 5-game win streak to start the season. They were blowing teams out. Now they got to get better at finding a way to win some of these ugly games because they've lost 2 consecutive ugly games. That was actually the primary theme from Fred Warner after the game yesterday. And he had a little summit with Nick Bosa. I've told you about the Bosa-Trent Williams meetings after games. Well, when Trent doesn't play, Trent's not part of that meeting. I got to turn off this alarm. Hey, Siri, turn off the alarm. Wow, that worked. I'm surprised. Good. All right, we had the alarm going off. Just alarm bells going off on the 49ers defense. And they will try to fix them. But the big picture perspective, to act like this is some kind of loss that eliminates them from playoff contention, to act like this is a loss in January is patently ridiculous. Since this team, again, started 3-5 2 years ago and 3-4 last year. They're 5-2 now. They've got issues, yes, but boy, they have a lot of time to fix these issues as well. Anyway, this is the grade show. We're going to go through this position by position. I was talking about my article. It's up on the screen. I was talking about the Trent Williams, Nick Bosa summits at usually at Trent's locker after games. Well, Trent didn't play yesterday, so it was a Nick Bosa, Fred Warner summit at Fred Warner's locker. And Warner's main theme was that the 49ers need to find a way to win some of these bar fights. Everything could be great, fine and dandy when you're beating the brakes off of teams, when you're winning 30-10. And it's awesome that the 49ers have the ability to do that, but it takes a little bit more mental toughness, a little bit more grittiness to be able to figure things out when it's grimy, when it's dirty. And things are going to be grimy and they're going to be dirty for the 49ers this season because they have a target on their backs. Teams are going to find a way, and they have found a way, to attack this 49ers team, especially their defense, and they are going to push, prod. They're going to zero in on that method, and they're going to make the 49ers prove that they can counter adjust to their adjustments. Yesterday, it was a whole lot of chip blocking. It was a whole lot of slide protection. Nick Bosa talked about it. This was his part of the summit with Fred Warner. He said that the Vikings lulled the pass rush to sleep. The 49ers can't stop the run yet. They did better in the second half, but it was another disaster against the run at the second straight week in the first half. That was part of what put them on their heels. But then all this max protect stuff from the Minnesota Vikings took the 49ers pass rushers right out of the game. This right here, before I get into the stats, this overarching stat is the one that we need to address off the bat. The 49ers had a 15.6% pass rush win rate. That was their lowest since 2017, according to Pro Football Focus, before Nick Bosa was around. And they have so much talent up front now. So what opponents are doing is working against this 49ers defense. And then whatever the 49ers defense hasn't been doing over the past 2 years has been working for its opponents over the past 2 weeks, not the past 2 years, over the past 2 weeks has been working for its opponents. The 49ers had an extremely high missed tackle rate relative to previous weeks against Cleveland. I'm going to look to see what the missed tackle rate was yesterday because this is important data. They missed a lot of tackles is the overarching point here. But if we can see exactly how many, then we'll see that the 49ers, yes, they're getting out schemed. I'm going to talk about Steve Wilks. Yes, the pass rush has lost steam. But on top of both of those things, they're just not making fundamental plays. It's just fundamental pillars of execution aren't happening for the 49ers the way that they need to be happening. All right, here we go. Defense, missed tackles. Let's see. Where are we at? 9 missed tackles. All right, there you go. The 2 season highs in missed tackles for the 49ers have come over the past 2 weeks. 10 missed tackles against Cleveland, 9 against the Minnesota Vikings last night. The 49ers, over the 3 weeks combined prior to the Cleveland game, had 9 missed tackles total. They have 19 now in 2 weeks. So 9 missed tackles over 3 weeks, 19 over the past 2. So this defense just isn't executing the way that it should. That's hurting them in the screen game. That's hurting them in the run game. And that's hurting their pass rush. That's a domino effect. The domino effect they need to reverse. And they have reversed a similar domino effect over the course of the past 2 years. There was some leaky run yardage that the 49ers were giving up early last season. There's a lot of run yardage they're giving up in 2021. They made adjustments. They moved forward under former defensive coordinator DeMeco Ryans, and now the challenge is there in front of Steve Wilks. But we're going to start our grades with the offensive side of the ball. Start this one with quarterback. So, Brock Purdy. I was waffling between C+ and B-. It was a tricky game for Brock Purdy because he was sensational for a large part of it. And he probably would have stayed really good had he had the adequate support from his defense in the game yesterday. But the defense gave up 378 passing yards to Kirk Cousins. The defense gave up, 8 of 13 third down conversions to Kirk Cousins and the Vikings. At a certain point, and Christian McCaffrey fumbled, obviously, on the first drive. So Brock Purdy was playing in a negative game script all game. And for 3+ quarters, that was fine. We said that Minnesota blitzed more than any other team in the NFL. Oh, they brought the heat against Brock Purdy. He had an answer against the blitz every single time. The key to beating a blitz is to know where your hot read is. You have to do your homework ahead of time. Brock Purdy did not get tripped up by a single Minnesota blitz. He beat it time and time and time again. I was watching the tape this morning. George Kittle had a nice big game. We'll talk about him in the tight end section. Brandon Ayuk caught some passes outside the numbers. Brock Purdy was delivering on the money. Jawan Jennings had some big catches that obviously Christian McCaffrey did as well. He scored a touchdown in the third quarter to bring the 49ers closer. I mean, Purdy was executing, but then he got tripped up, and you look at why he got tripped up. Well, there was the 3-man rush from the Vikings, which wasn't a blitz, where Colton McKivitz just got abused by Danielle Hunter. Hard to expect the quarterback. I mean, in that situation, I know Brian Baldinger was saying, oh, well, McCaffrey's open on the little check down here. The issue there is that you don't go into a play as a quarterback. No QB in the league goes into a play where there's a 3-man rush and he expects to have a guy in his lap in 1.5 seconds. That's exactly what happened. So that particular play was a failure from the 49ers offensive line. It ended up being a sack and a punt. It wasn't all that damaging for the 49ers. What was damaging was Purdy's biggest mistake of the game. And this obviously dropped his grade down from the A, which it probably would have been without this play, because I think the 49ers might have gone down the field and scored. So this one really cost them. It was the interception. It was intended for Jawan Jennings, and you had Cameron Bynum over the middle of the field. The Cal product, the safety, picked the football off. If you look at the replay, Jennings made a slight move outside before breaking in. I don't know if there was a little bit of a miscommunication, mistiming there. Shanahan said that Purdy just left that ball too far inside, which I agree with. It seemed that when Purdy threw that ball, halfway through the motion, he was like, oh, crap. I'm not really confident with where this is going. And it came out of his arm in kind of a fluttering way, didn't have the same zip as the rest of his passes, and just floated out there to Cameron Bynum. It was a bad interception. There's no question about it. It came at a really poor time, too, for the 49ers. And it was a pity because Brock Purdy had been playing a flawless game against the blitz up until that point. But the key to note is that the Vikings weren't blitzing. They're dropped in coverage on that play. The desperation interception at the end of the game, obviously, they were dropped in coverage on that play as well. So, the key in this game wasn't to blitz Brock Purdy more. It was to get a lead if you're a Minnesota and be able to drop back in coverage. If there's something that's going to be replicated against Purdy moving forward, if you can replicate that, if you can get ahead of the 49ers, I think other teams are going to struggle to do that. I don't think it's that easy to do. But that seems to be what worked last night for the Vikings. Having more players. And, hey, Purdy beat coverage too yesterday. I'm not going to pretend that he was all bad against coverage. It was just on the pick to Bynum when the Minnesota Vikings were sagging back. And it was a misfire. It would have been a completion had it been a good throw. So I don't think Purdy is an A-plus accuracy quarterback. I think he's got B accuracy. I think he's going to miss a couple throws every game. I think Kirk Cousins is an A-plus accuracy quarterback. Boy, he was on the money yesterday time and time again. But I do think that Purdy's a player. And we saw that throughout the course of the first 3+ quarters. We saw speed from Brock Purdy yesterday. His 10-yard burst is the same as Lamar Jackson's. You saw that on the big scramble early in the game when he got away, sprinted around the linebacker to the edge to pick up a first down. You saw anticipation. You saw command of the game. Brock Purdy was not the 49ers' problem yesterday. Far from it. The laundry list of blame can start with the defense, can continue the special teams, can continue with the offensive line. Brock Purdy is far down on the list. Christian McCaffrey's fumble on that list as well. Brock Purdy is far, far down on the 49ers list of blame from yesterday's game against the Minnesota Vikings. So I'll go B- because he did throw the pick that really, I think, turned the tide back into the Vikings' favor. The 49ers were marching back. He missed the throw to Jennings. I get it. Cameron Bynum intercepted it. Brock Purdy has to wear that. So he gets a B-. He doesn't get an A or an A+. But to not contextualize this, to act like that one play right there made this a bad game for Brock Purdy, ignores the fact that the formula of complementary football went out the window for the 49ers yesterday when the defense did not do its job. All right. And by the way, final line for Brock Purdy. I know I'm moving on to running backs, but let's get these stats open. Final line for Purdy, 21-30, 272, a touchdown, and obviously those 2 picks. And you talk to Shanahan, he's not really holding that second pick against Brock Purdy. That was a desperation situation. 30 to 40 seconds left, no timeouts. There actually was nobody open. They had a spy. It was a good – sometimes you got to give Minnesota's defense credit, right? They had Jordan Hicks spying Brock Purdy so he couldn't run, try to float up a tough pass. Bynum climbed the ladder, made the interception. They're professionals, too, on the other end. And the Vikings, you got to go tip your cap to the Vikings. They made some excellent defensive plays yesterday. That interception from Cam Bynum at the end of the game included. All right, running backs. I couldn't go above C+ because I think this game would have been very, very different if Christian McCaffrey hadn't fumbled on that first drive near the 10-yard line. Think about how this game started. Charvarius Ward outmuscled Jordan Addison on the crossing route for an interception. Ironic because Jordan Addison would outmuscle Charvarius Ward later in the game. You rarely see the same receiver cornerback combo twice in one game have a similar kind of play. One goes to the corner for an interception, one goes for a touchdown. But Mooney delivered a pick for the 49ers early on. Then the 49ers started driving, a couple nice throws from Purdy. Boom, they're in the red zone. They have a chance to score first for the 7th time this year in 7 games. But Christian McCaffrey fumbles. It was a really, really bad fumble. Now, Christian did a whole lot of nice things, even though he was playing hurt in this game after that moment. The run game wasn't particularly successful for the 49ers, only 15 carries, 45 yards from McCaffrey. But he did have a couple nice, tough runs that I think were important in the 49ers' comeback attempt. And obviously, he delivered the 35-yard touchdown on the screen pass to beat cover 0 to bring the 49ers back within 1 score. So you can't give a failing grade to McCaffrey because, again, he's a spark plug. And he was a spark plug yesterday. But he also took full accountability for it, but he also delivered the play that really set the 49ers back at the start of the game. If you're talking about helping out the offense, helping out Brock Purdy, well, you can criticize the defense until the cows come home, and we will. You can talk about the offensive line's failures against a 3-man front, and we will. But you can't ignore the fact that the 49ers fumbled away through Christian McCaffrey a potential lead on the first offensive drive of the game. And that completely changed the complexion because all of a sudden they're playing from behind because Minnesota got the ball, marched down the field. It was 7-0. Even 3-0 probably changes at least a little bit how this game plays out, right? Because they ended up losing by 5. So just simple math. If on that final drive, the 49ers are looking for a field goal instead of a touchdown, well, Minnesota isn't playing back in coverage. They're still blitzing or they're still playing more aggressive. Purdy was roasting the aggressiveness all night. So leaving 3 points on the board because of that fumble, at least 3 points on the board because of the fumble, was extremely, extremely damaging for the 49ers. Just the way it is. That's why I give C+. McCaffrey helped get him back into the game, but that initial mistake really, really hurt this football team. Receivers, Ayuk had 5 for 57. I thought Jennings made a couple nice tough catches, 5 for 54. No Deebo Samuel. Ray McLeod had a big catch on the final drive. Little slant pattern, picked up the chains on 3rd down. I'll give the receivers a B-. There wasn't anything splashy here, and I think a solid B is a good grade, and I would have needed a couple splashier plays in a game like this, especially with the opposing defense blitzing so much. I would have needed a couple splashy plays to go up to a B. I would have definitely needed a touchdown or something like that to go up to an A. There weren't any bad drops. Maybe, we'll try to figure out what happened on the interception. The first one from Purdy. Was there miscommunication with Jennings with him breaking out and then the ball being left a little bit too far over the middle of the field? That's all stuff that's going to be litigated for a while that we'll collect data on, collect some intelligence on over the days. But for now, I'll go B- for the receivers. They didn't win this game. They didn't lose this game. They didn't make any critical errors, at least it didn't seem. And the run blocking probably wasn't great because of the final numbers. And I've seen some of the tape. I haven't focused on the run blocking yet. I know there was a play where Wanham was able to split Jawan Jennings and George Kittle. So that's where I'm basing my run blocking wasn't great assessment because it created a big tackle for loss that derailed the 49ers drive. And I'm used to the 49ers rushing better than 22 carries for 65 yards. I do think that part of the issue was that they fell behind in this game thanks to their defense. And when you fall behind and you fall off schedule, you don't run as much. And the way that the Vikings were playing this game, they were being extremely aggressive, blitzing, as everybody expected. With that aggressiveness, the 49ers went more to the pass game, and it was working. They were moving the ball downfield. They obviously didn't finish the drives that they needed to finish. And I think part of the deal is if you're not going to run the football as much because opponents are blitzing the crap out of you, you're going to need some plays from your wideouts, and they didn't have Deebo Samuel. Probably would have helped in this game. But you're going to need some plays from your wideouts to deliver splashes to make them pay for blitzing on the back end. Kind of like the Vikings made the 49ers pay for blitzing with Jordan Addison, right, on that 60-yard touchdown. And we're going to talk about Steve Wilks' decision here when we get to the defense. 49ers needed to make the Vikings pay, and they didn't. So B- for the receivers. I'm just kind of lukewarm on everything from their game. Tight ends, though, were good. Even Dwelly had a catch in this game. A catch for 12 yards on the little screen right ahead of Christian McCaffrey's touchdown run in the second quarter that brought the 49ers a little bit closer. George Kittle, and here's one thing. Everybody loves to overreact and be a prisoner of the moment. Not everybody, but you get it. A lot of people like to be prisoners of the moment. Last week's moment was, George Kittle is over the hill. He's not involved enough in the pass game. There were good reasons for that last week. It was because McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel were the centerpieces of the game plan. Then they both got hurt. So the 49ers found themselves in a tough position. Well, for all of the hand-wringing about George Kittle, looks like it proved to be incorrect. 5 catches for 78 yards. He was very much still a factor. He's very much still in his physical prime. He hasn't gone downhill. Today or yesterday, the 49ers had a chance to involve George Kittle. It made sense to involve George Kittle, and they did involve George Kittle for 5 catches and 78 yards. Kittle did a good job pass blocking on some downs. He did both. He went out for pass patterns. He delivered there, and he did a good job in pass protection against Danielle Hunter. There aren't many tight ends in the National Football League who can do that. So well-deserved A for the 49ers tight ends. Unfortunately for them, it was not enough. All right, offensive line. I was struggling with this grade for a while. Colton McKivitz played his worst game. I think it was even worse than when TJ Watt got him for 3 sacks in week 1. McKivitz gave up 6 pressures, most of them to Danielle Hunter. But everything we need to look at should be framed with the perspective of the 49ers didn't have Trent Williams on the left side. They had Jalen Moore there, and Jalen Moore held up well. He gave up only 1 pressure. I thought that he did a good job communicating with his teammates. He didn't get flummoxed in the face of all those blitzes from Minnesota. So Moore was fine, but boy, they just teed off on Colton McKivitz. And the most damaging time when they teed off on Colton McKivitz was when they rushed only 3. Brian Flores is a boom or bust defensive coordinator when it comes to pressure. He'll either blitz the hell out of you. He leads the league in blitz rate. But when he doesn't blitz, he pulls everybody back. He just goes to the 3-man rush. So to me, Brian Flores is just throwing a bunch of crap up against the wall, hoping to generate mistakes because of unpredictability. And he absolutely generated a mistake, probably thanks in large part due to unpredictability when he only rushed 3 there in the third quarter. And Danielle Hunter just blew right by Colton McKivitz. That's an unacceptable lapse in pass protection. And when you're only facing 3 rushers and there's 5 offensive linemen, you can't let those numbers beat you. And the 49ers did on that play. McKivitz let Danielle Hunter run right by him. Brock Purdy had to tuck the ball, spin away, and go. He wasn't expecting that pressure to be in his lap so fast. Again, it's a team sport, and the offensive line failed there. That being said, the rest of the linemen, nobody gave up more than a pressure. So how am I supposed to grade this? Well, I think that from a blocking standpoint, the offensive line against all those blitzes did just fine outside of Colton McKivitz. And then McKivitz struggled at right tackle. So I take it from an A- or an A for those guys who did a decent job keeping Brock Purdy clean to a B-, a C+. It's tough because there's inconsistent data, inconsistent performance coming from different components of this football team. But again, game script matters, right? And if the defense puts you in a position, if Christian McCaffrey's fumble puts you in a position to where you're playing from behind, it's always going to look worse, especially for a team that's built on complementary football, that's built on trying to run the ball, put defenses on their heels. I mean, the Vikings did to the 49ers defense what the 49ers offense regularly does to opposing defenses, right? Run the ball with success, screen passes with success, diffuse the pass rush, put it on its heels, and then you can attack downfield. That's what the Vikings were able to do to the 49ers. They were able to run to set up the pass, and then they passed to finish the 49ers off. 49ers did not run for many reasons. Again, it's a team sport, and we look at the deficit, and we look at the Vikings blitz rate, and we look at the Christian McCaffrey fumble, which caused the deficit. We look at all those things as reasons, but they didn't run the football. They didn't diffuse the Vikings pass rush. They couldn't block that pass rush when it came out of a 3-man front. So even though Purdy was beating the blitzes, the 3-man front got to the 49ers and started changing this game, changing the tenor of the game in the third quarter. So I'll say B minus, C plus, whatever. But the main point when you go through my offensive grades are that they're not terrible, because the offense wasn't terrible. Yes, there was the critical error on the fumble. Yes, Purdy threw the interception, especially the first one, the Cam Bynum was the bad one. But in large part, I mean, Kittle had a good game. Dwelly had the catch. The offensive line, whatever. It was fine without Trent Williams. The true failures for the 49ers came on the defensive side of the ball in this football game. That's where we get a D for the defensive line. And I wrote about this, and this is where you can sign up for The Athletic. I mean, we're very, very critical of the 49ers defense, and that's the rational take after this football game. Here, Kirk Cousins, 35 of 45, 378 yards. Did throw the pick early on to Charvarius Ward, but 45 dropbacks, no sacks. 18 pressures for the 49ers, which isn't terrible. You'd like to have maybe a few more, but it wasn't effective pressure. There's a difference between pressure and effective pressure. The reason why it wasn't effective, well, again, it's multifold. In the first half, the 49ers allowed 6 yards per carry. They weren't setting the edge against the run again. They were getting washed out on the inside. The very first run for Alexander Mattison saw Javon Hargrave have to make a tackle 19 yards downfield because he just got pushed out of the play. Then they got the pick. People forgot about it for a while, but then the Vikings ran it down their throats again. And then when the Vikings weren't running it down the 49ers' throats in the first half, they were converting third downs. There was an early 3rd and 12, the Hawkinson, where the 49ers didn't get any pressure up front. So this defensive line, Nick Bosa, in the article that I wrote up there, Bosa said that the 49ers got lulled to sleep. There was chip, slide, and then they would have an opportunity. But at that point, because they had faced those double teams and those blocking schemes, all that max protect, and because they had given up something on the ground, so they're worried about a running play. They're on their heels. At that point, the 49ers weren't ready to capitalize on their opportunity. So we didn't see any game-breaking plays. And for a defensive line that features Nick Bosa, that features Eric Armstead, that features Javon Hargrave, that features Randy Gregory, somebody's got to make a game-breaking play at some point. That's what Fred Warner means when he's talking about, okay, we need to find a way to win these grimy games. Because grimy games need game-breaking plays. In a 30-10 win, you've made the game-breaking play early on. Your offense, somebody delivered a knockout punch in the first or the second quarter in those blowouts. But in this type of game, you need somebody to deliver and land the blow when you're up on the ropes in the third and fourth quarter, preferably the fourth. And that didn't happen. And the 49ers have a lot of money. I think $95 million total annual average value this year tied into the defensive line. They have a lot of money to not be getting that extra splash play. So Bosa regretted that after the game. He was talking about he had 6 pressures, but were the pressures effective? Maybe, but you have to credit Kirk Cousins because he was damn accurate yesterday, threading the ball downfield. The 49ers tried to augment the pressure with blitzes. Did it work? It worked a little bit better in some spots than when they didn't blitz, but then it burned them really badly. So on the aggregate, it didn't. We'll talk about the blitzes a little bit more when we get to the secondary because the Jordan Addison touchdown was against Charvarius Ward. Either way, the 49ers need to take a step up along the defensive line, and it's going to start against the run. There was a play early on where Hawkinson pancaked, this is a tight end, pancaked Drake Jackson. Maybe the 49ers are missing Sansom Ebukam, who was really, really good setting the edge against the run. Maybe his loss has been a little bit underrated. He's now with the Colts. But Jackson wasn't setting a good edge against the run. Javon Hargrave was getting washed out early against the run. That wasn't good. The best run defense plays came when the 49ers had their back up against the wall on the goal line. And maybe that's symbolic. Now their backs are up against the wall with short rest, 5.5 days before they have to play a resurgent Cincinnati offense coming off of a bye week. Maybe that's where the 49ers can deliver their best defensive performance, because it certainly hasn't come over the past 2 weeks. Their best defensive performance came with their backs up against the wall at the goal line. Fred Warner stopping the tush push with the really well-timed dive yesterday right over the line. Kevin Givens firing off the ball, had a free shot at the running back. Those are all big plays that kept the 49ers in this game at the goal line. Those were big plays at the goal line that allowed them to be in contention to win, despite the fact that Kirk Cousins threw for 378 yards. But boy, the 49ers defensive line has to be better in between the 20s, in between the 5s, to be honest. They were only good right there, right back up against the goal line. Now, there were a couple nice plays. Randy Gregory had a couple nice pressures for the 49ers. Bosa did have 6. And Gregory's pressures were effective yesterday. I think the 49ers have really liked what they've seen out of him for the first 2 weeks. But I don't think Armstead was good yesterday. I think he got washed out of runs that I don't normally see him get washed out of. I have already mentioned Hargrave. I mentioned Drake Jackson getting pancaked. I mean, it's a D. No sacks over 45 dropbacks is not good. Lowest pressure rate since 2017 is not good. The more I talk about this, the more I wonder why I just didn't give the 49ers defensive line an F. And it's probably because I liked what Randy Gregory did yesterday. Probably I liked what Kevin Givens did in the red zone yesterday. So maybe D- is more fair. But you get it. The grades aren't good for the front. Linebackers, well, they did adjust by the end of the game against the screen game. It's more that it's sniffing out screen passes. A lot of it's will. A lot of it is pure willpower. And it seemed to me when you have a team that's missed 19 tackles over the past 2 weeks, it seemed to me that against Cleveland and against the Vikings, some of that extra 110% willpower wasn't quite there. And we chalked it up to the 49ers not having Dre Greenlaw against Cleveland. He was back, and he was antsy yesterday. I mean, he was coming out of the tunnel. I was down there. He was yelling yesterday. He had some pent-up energy. And I thought that Dre did some good things. But the linebackers also got sucked into the stack a little bit too much. There were some effective screens, especially early in the second half from Minnesota, that allowed the Vikings to keep the line moving. Even when the 49ers started figuring out some of the run game, the screen passes kept the Vikings ahead of the sticks, and they put Kirk Cousins on a platform to succeed. So I look back at Fred Warner making the excellent play at the goal line. I look back at Fred Warner sniffing out a screen and diving and making a nice pass breakup. But then I think, well, that probably should have been an interception, because the 49ers needed an interception because they were playing so poorly elsewhere. They didn't have the luxury of just a PBU. They needed a pick. I think about a couple big Dre Greenlaw hits. I think about an Oren Burks tackle in the open field that was nice. But then I also think about all the screen passes that did work. I also think about all the runs that did work on the 6 yards per carry for Minnesota over the first half. And I can't help but give the linebackers anything, better than a C. Maybe a C-. It just wasn't good enough for the 49ers yesterday. Cousins was too comfortable, and he was too comfortable because the Vikings built him a platform to succeed. Most of the blame goes probably to the defensive line, although I also have the secondary getting a D. You'll see that in a second. Most of the blame probably goes to the defensive line. The linebackers were the best unit out of the defense, but they still weren't good enough because those screen passes really, really did hurt the 49ers early in the second half. Finally, the secondary, D. Charvarius Ward got this game off to a good start with the interception against Jordan Addison. Outmuscled him for the football. But this is where we come in with Steve Wilks, the 49ers' new defensive coordinator. I understand the temptation to up the blitz rate. Wilks did that yesterday. I think they blitzed like 11 times. Because when this group right here, the defensive line, has their lowest pressure rate since 2017, and Kirk Cousins is picking you apart, you want to ratchet up the pressure somehow so you blitz. but you can't be brazen with your blitzes. And I think that Kyle Shanahan didn't seem all too happy with the blitz at the end of the first half. 16 seconds to go, no timeouts for the Vikings. Completion over the middle of the field with a tackle means that they're going to have trouble getting the kicking unit on the field. They're going to have to rush up and spike it. They probably would have time to do that, but 3 points would have been a whole lot less damaging than the full 6 from the touchdown, right? And that's what happened for Minnesota because the 49ers brought an all-out blitz. They had Tashawn Gibson cover the underneath route, which left no safeties for Charvarius Ward against Jordan Addison. And, you could make the argument all day that, Ward should have intercepted that ball just like he won the first tug of war against Jordan Addison. And that's great. I get it. Charvarius Ward didn't execute. Probably could have just knocked that ball down, too, instead of going for the interception. Fine. Bad play. Didn't work. Great play. Jordan Addison for the touchdown. But if the 49ers aren't in an ultra-aggressive blitz mode, then there's a safety back there. And there's a chance that Kirk Cousins doesn't even make that throw. He probably just tries to go underneath. There's a safety back there so Jordan Addison can't break away and score a touchdown. That probably was the difference in the football game. Mathematically, it was. 6 points versus 0 in a 5-point game. Well, you get it, right? So there was that, and then there was a sequence in the second quarter where the 49ers got a couple penalties from the Vikings, including the offensive pass interference on the trick play. Minnesota's way, way back at midfield, and they pick up 44 yards over 2 plays. 1, because the 49ers coverage was a little too soft, and 2, because the 49ers and Wilkes brought a big, heavy blitz over the right side, right into the teeth of a screen pass to Cam Akers, who took it down to like the 3 or the 4 yard line. I mean, it was just such mistimed coverage on both of those plays between being too soft and then being way too aggressive, like chickens with their heads cut off, that it was like 44 yards in 2 plays. Are you kidding me? That's what the Vikings did in those 2 plays. It was like Steve Wilkes couldn't find the sweet spot, and he struggled to find the sweet spot so far this year. So Ward didn't make that second play. He did make that first play. He did commit personal foul penalties, not personal foul penalties, but pass interference penalties, holding penalties, illegal contact, whatever, in the second half. Deommodore Lenoir got flagged as well. I don't think Tashawn Gibson had a great game. I don't think the Talanoa Hufanga had it's hard to have a great game when Kirk Cousins is carving you apart. He was really accurate, so you got to give your credit to Kirk Cousins. But from just a big picture view, this 49ers secondary was not, just in general, not in the right position schematically to defend whatever. I mean, Kevin O'Connell on the Vikings and Kirk Cousins were a step ahead of them the whole game. I likened it to skiing. Over the first 5 games of the season, the 49ers were downhill skiing. Yesterday, they were trying to trudge up the mountain to get back to the chairlift. They're like, the pile of snow that the chairlift's on a little bit of a higher ledge. They're like shuffling their skis, laboring to get up. So Cousins picking them apart, 35 of 45. Now, the pass rush didn't help. It's a team sport. I get it. But the coverage has to fuel the rush, too. And the coverage, whether it be because they were blitzing too much, blitzing too little, not in the right coverage on the back end in some of these situations, it just wasn't working out for the 49ers. Now, again, we have to zoom out. I always say zoom out because the defense also struggled at this exact time of 2021 and 2022. They gave up 30 to Carson Wentz in the rain on this day exactly 2 years ago, week 7, October 24th, 2021. October 23rd, 2023, the 49ers had their worst defensive performance of the Shanahan era. And that was with DeMeco Ryans as defensive coordinator. They gave up 529 yards to the Chiefs. So before we go out and act like Wilkes can't call anything right, like this defense is buried, like it's over, remember that people were saying the same thing over the past 2 years, and especially last season, they figured it out and finished as the number 1 defense. So they have to make fixes just like they did over the past 2 seasons. And I've told you what the fixes are. You've got to stop the run. You've got to stop the screen passes. A lot of that is effort. A lot of that is focus. A lot of that is execution, effort, focus, and execution. They go together. The missed tackles tell a big story. 10 last week, 9 this week. That's too many. 19 missed tackles over 2 weeks after only 9 combined over the previous 3. So 9 in 3 weeks, 19 in 2 weeks. That's a big, big uptick in missed tackle rate. So it really does start with the basics. And if you get the basics right, if you are stopping the run, if you are setting the edge, if you are stopping those screen passes, all of a sudden Steve Wilks has a larger platform for success with his play calling, which wasn't good. I get it. It wasn't good. He was bringing blitzes when he shouldn't have, and he wasn't blitzing when he should have been blitzing yesterday. He wasn't hitting the right notes, but it's a lot harder to hit the right notes when you're not stopping the run and you're not stopping simple short passes, because those put opposing quarterbacks on the platform for success. All right, special teams. We're going to go C+ for the 49ers special teams unit. Jake Moody missed from 40, a yard shorter than his miss in Cleveland. But in what I thought might have been the biggest piece of positive long-term development in this game for the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, in big crunch time, late in the game, from 55 yards out, sent Jake Moody back out there, and Moody drilled it. Showed confidence in his young kicker. And I think Moody's at that stage of his career right now, going through his first rough stretch. Kickers, a lot of it, so much of it, maybe most of it happens in between the ears for kickers. He needed what I don't want to get too grand wall with this, but he might have needed a career-altering confidence boost, because this could have gone south in a hurry if he was either missing kicks or if Kyle Shanahan wasn't sending him back out there and letting him stew on those previous misses. So Shanahan sends him back out there. That's guts. That's faith in your guy, and Moody drilled it. So it's hard for me to give Moody and the special teams much better than a C+ after he missed the 40-yarder that could have really helped the 49ers, put them in a better position in this game. Really hard for me to justify that more than a C+ because he missed a very key kick. But he also made a 55-yarder, so I moved from the F to the D to C+ with that make. It was big, and keep your eyes peeled, because I think that Jake Moody might be on a good platform for success now moving forward. It is a quick turnaround to Cincinnati for the 49ers. 5.5 days. They're back in the Bay Area. They have a day off today. They have to lick their wounds. The good news for the 49ers, and you can knock on wood because we're not sure if this is final yet, is that it seems like they're relatively healthy leaving the turf in Minnesota. And if this team is relatively healthy, the past tells us that they have the personnel to figure this out, turn it around. They have a target on their backs. Their counter adjustments have to be stronger than ever before, but they counter adjusted in 2021. They counter adjusted in 2022. So they have to counter adjust here in 2023. So health is really important, but it's going to be tough playing with the bruises that they have right now after Monday Night Football, a bar fight on Monday Night Football. It's going to be really tough to turn this around and be ready to deliver 5.5 days later against a rested Cincinnati Bengals team. But this is one that the 49ers badly want. You can even say they badly need it. They're 5-2. They're still in first place in the NFC West, but they have a bye week coming up, and they would certainly like to enter that bye week with a good taste in their mouth. And that is what is at stake against Cincinnati, a team that has been improving as of late. Take a look at the 49ers defense last year. This is to illustrate that they also struggled. A higher dot on the chart is actually bad here. That is EPA per play of opposing offenses. This stretch last season, Atlanta and Kansas City, week 6 and 7. So essentially the Cleveland and the Vikings game last year, those were bad games for the 49ers defense. They gave up a otherworldly game to Kansas City a year ago to the day of this loss to Minnesota. But then they turned it around against the Rams the next week. That was the Christian McCaffrey historic game, but the defense turned it around at halftime. 49ers need something similar. I think people are really frustrated with DeMeco Ryans at this time last year. For some reason, they seem even more frustrated with Steve Wilks, probably because the blitzing It hasn't sat well with some people, especially there at the end of the first half. But Wilkes is going to have to find his sweet spot, like Ryan's found his over 2021 and 2022. He's going to have to find that sweet spot between aggressiveness and between that and sitting back. The 49ers are going to have to find their sweet spot up front, and it starts with stopping the run. There's a reason why I wrote about that last week. I think that I nailed it last week. The piece that I decided to write was this one right here against the Browns. And this ended up being the back-breaking issue for the 49ers defense. This is what I wrote after Cleveland. 49ers must fix a struggling run defense to unlock their pass rush. Well, guess what? They haven't yet fixed the struggling run defense, and the pass rush has not been unlocked. They have the talent. They absolutely have the talent. They still are in a good position. They're at 5-2. The grades weren't pretty today, but the 49ers are in a spot right now where they can look at the past and they could say, okay, we need to fix this, and we have time to fix this. They fixed it in 21. They fixed it in 22. Can they fix the ugly performance moving forward? That's the only appropriate way to frame this, because this is a team with Super Bowl talent. Well, now they have to start living up to those expectations again. They did for 5 games. They haven't for the past 2. Good news for them. These seasons are long. Everybody have a good day. We'll talk to you soon.